Hello, this is Dr. Caroline Peterson with Natural Women's Health Institute. I want to talk about the transverse planes in the body today. So transverse means going this way, across or horizontal. This is an idea that comes from old osteopathy and maybe other places too that I'm not familiar with. But a lot of the organizing paradigm that I do when I approach a person in their body is around the transverse planes. So to me, the transverse planes in the body need to be parallel to each other in order for each of those little sections that are above or below the transverse plane to be able to function properly, and then to be able to relate with the section that's above or below it. So what are the transverse planes? Transverse planes are made out of fascia, bone, and tissues like that. They run side to side and front to back. They have holes in them, and through the holes we have the blood vessels that go through, we have the lymphatic channels that go through, we have the nerves that go through. So all the tubes and the strings go through these transverse planes. What are the transverse planes? So there are 5 major transverse planes in the body. The first one that we can think of is here. This transverse plane is the sphenoid bone inside of the cranium and the tentorium that separates the cerebellum from the cerebrum. So that's the first transverse plane. That's important to have balanced in order for everything else to be set up. The second one is here. It's at the hard palate, the oropharynx, the eustachian tube, that whole area in there. The next one is here at the thoracic outlet, thoracic inlet, the collar region. The next one is what everybody probably knows best, maybe, is the respiratory diaphragm. Goes between the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity. And then the next one is the pelvic diaphragm, or the pelvic floor that people say. So when I start working with somebody, I always start here. I always start at the sternum and listen with my hand here, and that will tell me what is going on at this transverse plane right here. This transverse plane for me is very important to start with, since everything drains right here. The lymphatic and the blood drains here. And so if we're thinking about the body as a fluid system and as a pressure gradient system, then one of the important things is here, because we have the whole fluid system where the big transition points, and we have the lungs here too. So when I put my hand here and listen, then the body will draw my hand where it needs to go. And then I'll know, do we need to go to the front, to the back, to the side, which side, up, down? And usually the start is here. If it's not here, it's usually up. Very uncommon that the big pull is going to be going down, because everything needs to be hung. Everything needs to be hung. We hang from our ears, and so that is the sphenoid tentorium. I'll show you later more about what those things look like. This is just kind of like an introduction to how to think about things. So what happens a lot of times is that these transverse planes are not parallel to each other. And when they're not parallel to each other, then what happens is that you're going to get like pulling and improper tension on everything that passes through. So for instance, some common patterns are anterior head carriage and reclination. And so this is going to screw up the sphenoid and tentorium. Is going to screw up the hard palate and the occipital nasal oropharynx transverse plane here, and also the thoracic outlet. So that's extremely common. Many people have that. Part of it is just because of habitus, so postural habitus, things that we do over and over again, like looking at our phone, and that's very, very common. When you think about the origins of it, many times it's because babies have not had enough tummy time, and so their head goes into reclination, and they're not able to kind of have a neutral posture just because their whole musculoskeletal system was not set up properly from the get-go. So the next thing that we see is a lot of cervical thoracic juncture issues, and that would be the thoracic outlet, thoracic inlet, transverse plane, and that would be a hyperkyphosis along with the anterior head carriage, closing in of the chest, and that will close down on that thoracic outlet and that drainage system that's around it. After that, we have the respiratory diaphragm. So most people do not practice physiologic breathing. Physiologic breathing is canister breathing, where the core is engaged and there's actually movement in the rib cage as the lungs expand. Then the respiratory diaphragm is pushed down, displacing the organs in the abdominal cavity. That happens very infrequently in most people. And so we actually have, very commonly, we have a diaphragm that's kind of like teepeed or collapsed because it's not getting that movement pattern with every breath. And so then that makes it difficult for everything that has to go through the diaphragm to be able to go through well. And that can lead to like venous congestion and things like that, inflammation of the organs and things like that. And then pelvic diaphragm is the other one. So the pelvic diaphragm, a lot of times what will happen is that because these diaphragms further up are not engaged properly, we're going to have a pelvic diaphragm that's either like too tight or else can't engage. And so to only work with the pelvic diaphragm is a fool's mission. We really have to be able to engage all of these diaphragms because they reflect each other, they speak to each other, they play off of each other, and nothing in the body lives in isolation. And so that's the thing that we always have to think of when we're thinking of the transverse planes, when we're thinking of everything that happens above and below each plane. We have to always be thinking of relationship. So for me, the transverse planes in the body are a very good way to organize my thinking around what's going on in the body and how things are related. And so I think this is something that not many people have a paradigm built around, and that it's very, very helpful, and I'd love to share it with you.